Hey everyone, today I wanted to address the question, does Catholicism know something you don't? And in this video, I hope to address the growing sense of divide between secular people who view the church as oppressive to their happiness and faithful Catholics who hold up to the teachings of the church as necessary and true. And it seems to me that one of the greatest reasons that there is this disconnect between these two groups is that one group has something that the other group doesn't. One group has something called grace. And so, what is grace? In his book, God Dwells Within Us, Thomas Dubay, SM, uses a great analogy to explain what grace is and how it functions. So there are two categories of grace. There's created grace and uncreated grace. Uncreated grace is God himself, that indwelling the fullness of the divine that you receive into your soul at your baptism, so long as you're in a state of grace. Created grace is a gift from God that he gives that is like a sixth sense. And what this sixth sense allows you to perceive is the presence and activities of God. And so in this way, the more grace, the more created grace that you receive, the more it becomes abundantly obvious and unquestionable that God exists and is acting around you. An analogy I would like to use to describe this to someone who is not a practicing Catholic is, it is as if one is blind and is missing out on color, and it is only through the gift of sight that this person is able to perceive that color exists. And if the blind person were to go around saying, this color thing that everyone's talking about, that they say is so wonderful, it's ridiculous. There's absolutely no evidence that color exists. I've never seen it. I've never seen any reason to believe that color exists. And then you have a group of people who have been given the gift of sight, who say, I don't know how you're missing this. This is amazing. An interesting thing to remember in this type of an example is that the blind person's inability to perceive color has no bearing on the reality of whether or not the color exists, because truth and reality is not dependent upon our own perceptions as individuals. It exists outside of ourselves. So for the person who has not been divinely gifted this ability to perceive God, this person looks around the world and rightly, from their perspective, notices, I have cravings, I have desires, there are bodily, carnal desires I have, there are emotional, social desires I have, and I know that when I satiate these desires, I get a little piece of happiness. For a period of time, I am happy when my desires are met. And so for an entity to tell me that I am wrong to pursue fulfillment of my desires because I know from experience that this makes me happy, then that group is evil and they're oppressive and we need to do away with them. Whereas Catholicism is viewing reality in a fundamentally different perspective because they have this additional sensory ability to perceive a reality that the other group cannot perceive. And so with this increased perception, they see the difference between finitely packaged nibbles of happiness and the source of eternal joy itself that exists. And it has the perspective to see that a lot of these pursuits of fulfilling desires are against the will of eternal joy itself and shove a wedge in between that individual and eternal joy. And so to the one who can see eternal joy, out of love for the person, they say, stop what you're doing. You're hurting yourself. What you are doing, your sin, is preventing you from drinking from the source of eternal joy itself. You are robbing yourself. So if a secular person or a non-practicing Catholic sees this video and is willing to offer the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, let's pretend there's something that you can see that I can't. Let's pretend I'm missing out on something. What would be the route I should take to be able to begin to perceive what you're describing. So the normal pathway to receive these gifts of grace, both created and uncreated, is the reception of the sacraments of the Catholic Church with a penitent, loving, and sacrificial disposition. And the final really beautiful thing to remember, even for those of us who have already been the recipients of grace, is to note that this uncreated source of grace, this indwelling of God that you receive at your baptism and maintain through making use of the sacraments, this is not something that you get more of as you increase in holiness. The amount of God, the fullness of God that you receive at your baptism is the fullness that exists. And so God is not on some faraway mountain that you have to climb to reach and realize fully. He is something that you already have within you. And in the same way, the secular person is getting in their way to being able to see it. Even though you can see it a little bit more, you could still be getting in your own way to being able to see it. So this is just, an opportunity to recognize that if we can just get out of our own way, God is not something that will be given to us later. We already have him. And this is probably the best news that could possibly exist. You have eternal joy already. You just have to be willing to perceive him and open to it. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time.